What if I told you that cold and flu season isn't actually caused by winter, but rather it's caused by us? And that cold and flu season isn't actually something that you have to go through. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Own It Show. I'm your host, Justin Roethlingshoefer. And if you're new here, today is a great episode to dive in because we're going to debunk everything about cold and flu season today. And if you're wondering what the Own It Show is all about, why it even matters that you're here, this is where we empower, equip, and educate you to take ownership of your health. Holistically, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. What does it look like to integrate all of these things together so that you can truly step into the version of yourself that God created for you with the maximum amount of impact, the maximum amount of influence, and the maximum level of legacy that you've ultimately desired? Because I think the more that I run these episodes, the more that I dive into them, the more feedback that keeps coming back of how it's truly transforming people's lives. And it's just content that is looking at everything together very holistically. There's a lot of single pillars out there and a lot of myths, but here we seek the truth. And if we can give you the truth, then that is truly what we sit in to do. And today is no different. What if I told you that cold and flu season isn't actually caused by winter, but rather it's caused by us? And that cold and flu season isn't actually something that you have to go through. When you think about cold and flu season, when we say cold and flu season, it's like this mysterious, inevitable force that comes year after year, kind of lurking in the distance. Come October, November, in the majority of states and cities throughout the US and Canada, that it's just waiting to pounce and prowl. But what if we zoom out and we actually take a top-down approach? We can start to see the dominoes falling long before the sniffles start, meaning that we can actually see this dating back to August and September, even before the sicknesses start in December, January, February. And so as we enter into November, as we're starting to go through November here, today I want to walk through why this happens like clockwork every single year. And more importantly, how you can start to break this cycle. How you can break the cycle for not only yourself, but for your family, for your kids, for your friends, for your communities, for your schools. Everything around you can start to actually shift and change, and you get to be the sickness breaker. And so what I want you to do is I want you to stick through to the end, because at the very end of this podcast, I'm going to give you a very clear protocol. Basically what we recommend, what Own It recommends to keep your immune system bulletproof through not only the holiday season, but right into the new year. So you start January on fire rather than from in some type of cold, flu, or sickness. And so I'm going to go through these different triggers, and there's ultimately going to be 5 big triggers, 5 big dominoes that lead to cold and flus. And when we think about these triggers, I want you to think about the number of bullets fired. And after a certain number of bullets fired, man, we go down. We can no longer maintain, we can no longer push it off, we can no longer fight it off, and we just fall. But if we're actually able to start removing the triggers from our system and start to reverse engineer how these triggers are actually firing in our lives, we can actually take ownership back and we can see our health thrive rather than slowly start to decay. And so the first domino is when it effectively begins, which is back to school. Seasonal trigger number 1 is September or early fall. Here's what we end up seeing is we get less outdoor time for kids, families, and adults, meaning we get decreased light exposure. So let's think about it. Kids go back to school, they're getting up early, they're getting into schools all day long. They maybe get a little recess or a lunch break to go outside. They might have a spare block. They might play a fall sport that's outside, but then they're coming home and they're getting inside for homework or whatever it might be. In your business, you're no longer spending as much time outside. Summer holidays are over. And so you're locked in that cage in the whatever that might be for you in the sense of your office space. Because we spend more or less time outdoors, by default, we have to spend more indoor close contact time. That means we're indoors, we're locked inside, thus there's higher transmission of germ opportunity. So because we are inside, and then because we're not getting as much fresh air outside, and my guess is that we don't have high quality HEPA air filters. My guess is we don't have non-LED lights around us. My guess is we don't have big, beautiful windows in every single room that we're in. And so we're not giving even the opportunity in our environment to start to thrive. So less outdoor time, more indoor time with close contact time with people, increased stress from the schedule changes. So all of a sudden you were sleeping in to a certain time because of the summer holidays. You were staying up maybe a little bit later. There was a little bit more flexibility in terms of how your days went. And then boom, September 7th, everything became rigid. Everything became more stressful. Everything became like turned upside down. And so because you've got cortisol elevation, you've got lower immunity. Because you've got lower immunity, your stress responses start to go up. The inflammation response starts to go up in your body. You start to pull more vitamins from your cells to try to actually counterbalance that. And we'll get into number 2, but we start to see lower levels of vitamins, and thus our cells become a little bit more exposed to these levels of sicknesses. And then the last thing, we see the sleep schedule shift. Earlier mornings, circadian rhythms disrupted. Thus, we're not getting the sleep quality we need every single night. We know when we don't get the sleep quality we need every single night, we start to see the ability for our body to detoxify go down. So we're not having the level of vitamin and mineral density that we need at the cellular level. Thus, we're not seeing the level of recovery that we need because we're not getting the sleep that we need. Thus, detoxification goes down. And all of a sudden, we start to see our body start to increase stress. The science tie-in here is that lower sun exposure equals lower levels of vitamin D daily. Thus, we have a reduced immune resilience. And then it also creates the sleep disruption, which weakens our innate immunity right off the bat because we're not detoxifying as well. And so your immune system is most vulnerable when your circadian rhythm, vitamin D, and sleep qualities drop. Not because germs get stronger. Hear that. It's not because germs all of a sudden get stronger in the fall. No, it's because the environments we put ourselves in are not optimized. So then we pop in and we've been able to get ourselves finally to a semblance of normalcy or a rhythm that we feel good with. And boom, daylight savings time hits, right? Another circadian rhythm hit. So this is now seasonal trigger 2. This happens in early November or October if we're in Canada. And what we start to see is that there's a sudden circadian rhythm disruption by 1 full hour, I might add. So when all of a sudden we fall backwards, what happens is the sun comes up earlier, but also the days are getting shorter, and thus we actually see an hour less of sunlight every single day. So now it's just compounding the effect of not getting sunlight. So we've got decreased sunlight, earlier darkness, mood obviously is going to start to dip. Our desire to go get more movement or go for walks starts to actually diminish. And I'll tell you like a live story is Elise and I have a walk after dinner with our dog that we do. It's about 12 minutes. It takes us maybe 15. And we usually go around 7:30. Well, 7:30 now when we're going, it's dark. Like it is literally dark. We have to put a flashlight on our dog and we carry a flashlight with us. And that's just our commitment to continuing to go and do this walk that we do after dinner. But a lot of people are just like, we're just not going to do it anymore. The other thing we start to find is we had clients that we started to really start to track because we've had clients for now 3 and 4 years where we would seasonally track what their step count was. And in the summer, they average about 12,000. And in the fall and winter, they averaged about 7,500. So it's almost half the amount of movement simply because you're not outside as much, you're not being as active, you're not going for walks as often, you're not getting the fresh air. And so these things start to actually add up. So then what starts to happen because of the circadian rhythm change is that our melatonin and cortisol levels are off. Remember, cortisol and melatonin are 2 hormones that are complete opposite of one another. When melatonin is high, cortisol has to be low. That's what creates our circadian rhythm. Well, when now all of a sudden you've switched to our time zones and we don't have an actual playbook, which we'll talk about at the end of the podcast, for how to adjust to time zones properly, what ends up happening is now we get this tired and wired misalignment. So we go to bed wired every night and we wake up tired every day. And that gets us into a really poor sleep quality rhythm, which ultimately starts to take a toll on our body. And then lastly, we have the reduced energy. Now, this is kind of like a chicken or the egg thing, right? Did the reduced energy lead to less walking, less movement, less activity, or did less activity lead to less energy? And so I want to take this from the lens of when you see where we were before. If we've never been fit, if we've never been active, or we were trying to get in a rhythm and all of a sudden we stopped moving, movement creates more energy. So less movement creates less energy. Has anybody ever taken a walk outside and come back in feeling more tired or more exhausted or more mentally foggy? No. Movement is medicine. And when we see that reduced hour, we end up slowing down and moving less. It's simply science. So we have to start backing up and being so intentional with how we do things. So the science tie-in here is that studies show that daylight savings time leads to an increased level of inflammation, immune suppression, and sleep disturbances. Thus, HRV dips in many populations the week after the clocks change. And so what does it look like to be proactive in that? Much more purposeful. And so when we put the own it lens on this, we have to know that when light exposure plummets, your biology is one of its main regulators, one of its main rhythm sources. Remember, we created day, we created night. Evening came, morning came, first day. We have to get back to our rhythm. So what does it look like to purposefully put rhythms together? So we've got the domino, right? Back to school, first major disruption. Second major disruption, circadian rhythm hit with daylight savings time. Now we bring on October 31st, Halloween. And when we think about Halloween, this is, my gosh, candy consumption spikes. Thus, we're getting sugar overload. When we get sugar overload, we know that sugar suppresses immune activity at the cellular level for 4 to 6 hours after consumption. Well, now we've never had candy in the house, but now we've got candy in the house because we bought it for trick-or-treaters. Now we bought candy in the house because the kids went and got some candy, and now we have to start to ration that. But when we ration it, they're having it now at school because there's all these Halloween parties day after day after day after day. Then we've got these late nights and different parties. And because we're now staying up later to go to the parties, there's a Halloween party on this weekend, there's a Halloween party on this weekend, there's a Halloween party on this weekend, there's something throughout the week. My goodness, sleep debt starts to accumulate. And then when we have stress plus blood sugar volatility, it creates systemic inflammation in the cells. So now let's back up. If we know that HRV, and if what I'm about to say is foreign to you, I suggest you go back to listen to my 5-part series I did at the beginning of this year in January. And then I did it again in June, talking about heart rate variability, the things the cells need in order to thrive, VO2 max, cellular deficiencies, and sleep quality, and understanding how these all communicate together. Because here, let's take a look at this. When we go back to school, we now all of a sudden have less movement, less time outside means we're having less, or we're getting greater cellular deficiencies in vitamins, minerals, amino acids. We're getting poorer sleep quality. And then we're also seeing VO2 max drop. So less oxygen, less nutrients, less ability to detoxify. Now, on top of that, we're adding toxins with candy and poor diet and nutrition, which ultimately is leading to blood sugar spikes, which directly impairs neutrophil activity, which is our body's defense mechanism and our first line of defense in helping to prevent any type of cold and flu. And so sugar doesn't just make kids hyper, doesn't just make adults have attention deficit issues, but it makes immune systems sluggish. So now we pop over, we've seen 3 major dominoes, right? We've got daylight savings time, we've got back to school, as well as Halloween. Now we populate into Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving, which is also now holiday season. Because what happens in mid to late fall, we got domino 4, seasonal trigger number 4, overeating and high sugar meals. So now we're going to eat more than we should. So we're taking a greater calorical intake in while getting less movement and less steps, which is going to suppress VO2 max. We're going to have higher sugar meals or more rich food that ultimately is going to deplete our cells of the nutrients that we actually need from the high nutrient density and fresh food that we typically would be eating. We've got late nights and travel. So we've got not only still trying to reel from the daylight savings time changes, but now we're also trying to reel from traveling and time zone changing and being on the road, and thus we are out of our typical environment. So we're having poor sleep quality, which is limiting our ability to detoxify. And then because of the less movement, we're also now seeing VO2 max drop, which less oxygen efficiency, alcohol intake usually spikes around the holiday time. And so again, we're seeing a deeper level of immune suppression because of the sleep quality disruptions that are going to be there. And I haven't even started to talk about the emotional stress, the mental stress that comes with chaotic schedules and being with family. Because remember, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional stress, the body doesn't know the difference. And because of this, we end up seeing a major issue in the sense of actually being able to have something holistically that's managing our stress in a positive way. So HRV plummets. And we start to wonder why this is happening. Why am I not feeling well? Why do I have headaches? Why am I brain foggy? Why am I feeling like I'm getting colds and flus all the time? Why are the kids coming home and they were sick in October and now they're sick again in December and then they're going to be sick again in February? Well, just one night of sleep loss, can reduce natural killer T cells by up to 70%, while overeating and alcohol both increase oxidative stress. So oxidative stress is the amount of stress being taken on by the cell. We know that when the cell starts to decay, it lowers our immune system while increasing inflammation. When we're naturally increasing inflammation and naturally increasing oxidative stress, but decreasing the one way in which the body defends that, which is killer cells, it's a double-edged sword. And so there's no choice other than to typically get sick because that's the body's way in which it goes to fight it. And so when we think about the holidays, it's not that this feasting for a small season or a small day or a small time with family is a bad thing, but unbounded, lack of boundaries of indulgence at scale provides the perfect environment and the perfect storm for immune suppression. And so we have to come back to why are we doing this? And then lastly, this is where we see Domino 5 hit, because we've seen back to school and the chaos that creates. We've seen the daylight savings time and the issue that creates. We've seen Halloween. We've now gone into Thanksgiving. We've probably battled 2 or 3 colds or flus by this time already. But now we come into the 5th one, which is Christmas and the New Year's crash, which is seasonal trigger number 5, which goes through December and January. And this is, again, where we end up seeing this chronic sleep disruption because of all the parties, the traveling, and the late nights. It just gets exacerbated, right? What was going on just in Thanksgiving, where you travel to family, or maybe you hosted family, or it was a 3-day event where we had football and everything going on. Now, all of a sudden, it's happening, and it kind of turns into from the last week of November, and it kind of blends all in to December 25th, 26th. And then we've got that week-long of no man's land. And then all of a sudden we've got another party to bring in the new year. And then all of a sudden, boom, it's like new year, new me. And I feel like I'm behind the 8 ball and I'm getting sick all of a sudden. And so this is where we have to start being very intentional, because not only do we have chronic sleep disturbances through Christmas and New Year's, but now the nutritional quality hits a seasonal low because of all the heavy, rich foods, all of the different types of sweets that are around, all the different types of alcohol and sugary beverages and everything that comes with Christmas. We've got the stress levels that are rising because maybe there's financial pressures from all the gifts we have to buy, the gifts that we have to get to all the friends and our family. We've got the travel expenses that come on with this. We've got the family exposure and being with everybody. We've got to go and actually battle the lines at the mall. We've got the emotions that come up with different things. Maybe you're missing somebody who was typically with you this year and they're not. Maybe you broke up with somebody. Maybe the family has dispersed, whatever it might be. But there's all of this mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual stress that culminates around the holidays. And then you add in the alcohol, the sugar, the less sunlight, the more time indoors. Your VO2 max has definitely been declining because of the time indoors. And then your nervous system is basically under this chronic sympathetic overload, this chronic stress state. And so you've got a low HRV, you've had a weakening immune system for the last 2 or 3, and it has just been a constant low grade level of inflammation and poor recovery, which has led to an increased susceptibility to viruses. And by the time the new year hits, most immune systems are at their weakest, and that's when the viruses finish their job. And so when you think about this, the real story is not cold and flu season. The real story is the journey that we've been going on unbeknownst since September. We've been getting less sun. We've had circadian rhythm disruption. We've been eating a diet that's higher in sugar and inflammatory loading, was very unintentional to us. We've had less sleep and more stress. We've started to increase our alcohol intake, and we've been overeating. We've got more indoor time. We've got our immune suppression as that starts to accumulate. And so when we think about the cell heals. The cell is built to heal, but it needs oxygen, which is the language is VO2 max. It needs the ability to detoxify, which is the language is sleep quality. And then you need high quality nutrient density at the cellular level, and the language is cellular efficiency. Well, less movement, less time outdoors, less fresh air. Ultimately, your VO2 max has been going down, so your body's been getting less oxygen over the course of this time. You've been getting less sleep over the course of this time, so that means your body's not detoxifying as well, while at the same time placing more toxins on it because of the poor nutrition, because of the sugary foods, because of the alcohol consumption. And so it's a double-edged sword. You're ultimately depleting yourself of nutrients because the body's trying to fight all of this stuff off while not getting the level of replenishment that it should actually be getting. And so flu isn't waiting for winter. Our habits are creating the perfect environment for colds and flus to thrive, and suddenly, boom, they hit. And so this isn't about fear, what we're talking about here, but a level of ownership. And why, when you live a certain way, when you create a certain environment, when you have certain habits and behaviors and establish certain rhythms with high degrees of intentionality, it's inevitable that you will see a better outcome. It's inevitable that you'll be the person who's able to push off all of these sicknesses that other people are seemingly falling with every so often. And so you can't control the season, but you can control your terrain and the environments that you put yourself in. And so I want to leave you here with a protocol, something that you can follow, something you can go through, something that can literally give you the freedom that will allow you to step into this season with armor on that will help you get to where you need to go. And if we think about this, there's going to be seven things that you need to lean into. So the first one is light is medicine. Light is medicine. I'm going to talk about movement is medicine, but light is medicine, number one. Got to get 10 to 20 minutes of your morning sunlight every single day. That's a non-negotiable. If the sun doesn't come out until well past you getting up, invest in a red light or a full spectrum lamp if needed. But sit in front of this. I've got red lights all over. I've got red lights in my office here. I've got red lights in my podcast studio. We've got red lights in our bathroom. We've got red lights in our gym, in our recovery area. We do this on purpose because we're up before the sun, but we sit in front of the red light to get the circadian rhythm rocking again. It keeps circadian rhythm steady. Thus, it increases a better sleep and immune function protocol. Number two is protect your sleep window. I've talked about this all the time. Non-negotiable, consistent wake time, consistent sleep time. If we can stick to that and have a 7 to 8 hour window, anchor your bedtime. What time do you go to bed? Non-negotiable, protect it. What time do you wake up? Non-negotiable, protect it. It's not going to be perfect, but even if you stay up a little later, get up at the normal time. Keep circadian rhythm normal, and then go to bed the next night. Never miss 2 nights of your bedtime window in a row. Always, always, always make sure that if you miss one, you hit it the next night. And then by protecting that, you've got a 3 hour cutoff window before you go to bed. So if you go to bed at 10 o'clock, make sure no meals after 7 p.m. It allows for HRV to optimize and sleep quality to get deep. And then use blue light blockers at night, which protects the melatonin production. The third is have a sugar and alcohol strategy. What I mean by this is you don't have to eliminate it and be the person that doesn't have any type of engagement and fear it, but rather have a management strategy. Say, you know what? I know I'm going to this party. I'm going to allow myself to have 1 glass of wine and that's it. And the rest I'm going to have non-alcoholic beverages. Or you know what? I'm just going to have club soda and electrolytes. Or I'm going to do something that allows me to still participate, but I'm not going to just succumb to the peer pressure. Make a commitment before you go. Have a strategy before you go so that you're not ultimately just succumb to the situation. Eat protein and fats first at every meal and then carbohydrates to blunt the sugar response. And then make sure that you're hydrating with 20 ounces of water with your electrolytes first thing in the morning, which will help with the way in which your body starts to absorb all of these different types of foods and hydration throughout the day. Number 4 is breath work and nervous system regulation. If you're able to get a daily 2 to 5 minutes of breath work every single morning when you wake up and every single night when you go to bed, it will start to regulate your heart rate variability. It will start to regulate your stress response no matter what is going on around you, no matter what the environment is. And so it keeps you in parasympathetic mode, meaning the healing zone regularly. So no matter what went on throughout the day, your body has a greater capacity to start to even deal with what you put yourself on. Number 5, movement. Even if it's minimal. Remember, movement is medicine. So walk 10 minutes after every single meal. Make it a commitment. I'm going to walk for 10 minutes after every meal. Be a leader in your family. Start to bring them along for the ride. Do this as a family bonding time. Do it in that community sense. It's amazing what you'll start to see. On Thanksgiving, be the person that starts a football game or be somebody that says, hey, we're going to go on a family walk or a family hike or be outdoors or whatever it might be. But be that person, because if you can maintain VO2 max through short bursts of cardiovascular activity and resistance training 3 days a week, no matter what this is, you will see that you, just by doing this, will become more resilient. So getting your 180 minutes of zone 2 work every single week and your 30 minutes of zone 5 work every single week, you will start to notice that you have an improved ability to operate this way. 6th, supplement smart. We talk about this all the time at Own It, where we have your cellular testing. Now more than ever is more important to get your cellular testing done and know what you're deficient in so that you can have a customized supplementation product that can help you during times when it's typically a little bit more vulnerable. So focus on that. Get that in, get that done, get your testing done. And if you don't want to get testing done, which I highly suggest, at least start to have a multivitamin that's methylated, have a vitamin D plus K2, especially if your sunlight is low, and make sure that you're starting with your electrolytes in the morning. Those are the non-negotiables that you have to lean into. And then lastly, number 7, gratitude. Making sure that you are leaning into this space of gratitude, because immune resilience is just not physical, it's relational, emotional, and mental. We have to make sure that we lean into this, knowing that this matters. Have a community of people around you that are pulling you in this direction, that are not trying to pull you down, but rather a like-minded community that are driving you towards these intentional habits and behaviors. What showing your body as stewardship looks like, what truly stewarding the environment that you're in looks like, which is why being able to engage and be a difference maker in your family is so amazing, because you can't supplement your way out of a lifestyle that is out of order, but you can design rhythms in your life that make your body a fortress. So really quick again, and if this is of interest to you, please just DM me, go to my Instagram @JustinRoth, DM me cold and flu. And if you DM me cold and flu, I will give you this protocol. I've got a beautiful outline of this protocol in a PDF form. And so I'll make sure that I can get this to you. You can print it out. You can make sure you've got it all set up for you. But my closing takeaway here, cold and flu season is not some invisible monster that's hunting you down. It's something that we ultimately walk into and create by simply compromising our way there. We fade into it, we float into it, we drift into it because we just follow the way in which the world operates. And it's the inevitable result of a lifestyle that starts back in September and just simply compounds over time. Our compromises compound just like our commitments compound. And so with a life of intentionality, with ownership, you can enter January with energy, clarity, and resilience instead of congestion, fatigue, and burnout. And it starts today. It starts by implementing these things today. And so what I want you to do, again, DM me on Instagram @JustinRoth, DM me cold and flu, and I will give you the exact protocol so we can help you get through this and really end up thriving all the way through holiday season, right into the new year, so that you can truly take ownership and start living a life by design, because we know success is different. So own your different, and we'll see you guys next week.